Welcome to Wednesday, Secular Soapbox Day here on the Skeptic Haven Network. I'm your host, Mike Wiseman. Today's topic is going to be the origins of God. As always, I'll be joined by my favorite co-host, Apostacie. Today's special guest is going to be Derek from MythVision. Welcome. Let's start the show. Yay! Welcome, everybody. Apostacie, thanks for joining us again. Derek, thanks for coming on. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure.
So for those that don't know what you do, explain a little bit about your channel and what you do.
So it's an OnlyFans page. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's YouTube. We were joking before the show, so I had to cup on some icing on the cake. I have a YouTube channel, and it started out as a journey where I was a Christian most of my life, and there was content that I was finding on the internet that piqued my curiosity of whether or not what I believed was true. And do we even understand what the text of the Bible is teaching? And so I started looking into it more. Some of the stuff was conspiratorial, I must admit, not academic. And I started becoming more and more, I guess you'd say, academic.
Fine-tuned.
As time goes by. Yeah, fine-tuned. Yeah. See? We're all theists in the heart, It's just...
It's still in there, man.
It's still in there. If I'm glitching just a tad, it's because my computer's trying to literally catch up. So forgive me.
You're good.
It's all
You're good.
Yeah.
No glitches so far. Oh, well, maybe we got glitch now. Are you there?
Yes.
Thanks for that. That's awesome. No, so growing up a Christian, and then you dived into the Bible. Awesome, man. A lot of us did that for sure. So what were the kind of the sources you used to dive into the Bible and do the research on the history and whatnot?
So initially it was apologist. I pretty much watched William Lane Craig, Ravi Zacharias, Mike Licona, a lot of the Christian apologists that are out there, because they have such a confidence about what they're saying that you're like, they can't be wrong. And what they're saying lines up with my experience of what I feel is true. And there's no real basis other than I'm looking at a text that says a guy actually died and rose again from the dead. And people, believed it. And so they believed it. I believe it. And so that was my source. Of course, reading the Bible. What the Bible says is true. I was an inerrantist. I believed every word was perfect.
Yeah.
And then as I started leaving, I started realizing there's weird stories. There's like repetitive narratives that I found throughout the biblical text that made me go, is that historical? It was like common sense stuff. Like, for example, I started looking at numbers. I started looking at elements like fire and rain and the clouds. In the story of Moses, when he leaves Egypt, you'll notice they're following fire by night, cloud by day. And if you go into the Elijah-Elisha story, you'll find a common theme as well. And you'll be like, what's going on? It's not identical, but you'll find fire and water. And I started looking at patterns like 70. There were 70 elders who were with Moses. Really, technically, it said there were 2 in the camp. So 72, which is an interesting sacred number. But then I looked in Elijah and Elisha's story, and I saw there's 72 there. And then I read in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus sent them out 2 by 2, and there were 72 of them. I'm glitchy, aren't I?
You're good now. You're good now. You're back.
I almost got raptured there. See, Jesus, literally, we had a heart-to-heart just now.
It's coming in.
Yeah, and I thought, okay, maybe this is historical. Maybe. So then I dove a little deeper, and I found even more. And there's always like a 2. There's Moses, then Joshua. Then there's Elijah and Elisha. Then you have John the Baptist and Jesus. And I started going, what are the probability in my mind that this is really what actually happened and not theology? Like they're writing a story. And this is while I was a believer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that really like messed me up though, because I was like, hold on, like what is really happening? And then I bumped into an atheist.
Mm.
Like, can I tell you something?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, this is honestly, there's a sixth sense when you're a believer. You kind of, it's a joke here. My point
The
is,
Holy Spirit.
Yeah, of course.
I could tell that this guy was wanting to tell me something that was going to pop a bubble of mine.
Uh-oh.
And he was like, listen, can I talk to you and fill you in on some cool stuff? I'm like, sure. We get on the phone and he's like, hey man, great to talk with you. I used to be a full preterist too. I won't waste your time on what that means. Because it's like a whole doctrine within eschatology, which is also, that means the end time studies, the second coming of Jesus and all of that.
Yeah.
So we're hanging out on the phone and I had this gut feeling, this guy's not like a believer or something. So I was like, listen, hey, I'm not going to think differently about you, bro, but I really just want to know. And I promise you, we keep talking. Are you an atheist? Do you believe in God? And he was like, Derek, I'm not going to lie to you, man. I really don't want this to ruin the conversation because I don't even care. You can believe and don't believe. I don't care about that. I just want to share with you some stories and interesting things. And he's like, but yes, I'm an atheist. And I said, oh, dude, trust me. I don't think of you differently. And in my mind, I'm like, he's an atheist. He's a freaking atheist. Like, I got to really be careful with this guy.
Yeah.
He's probably cooking babies right now.
Could be eating them as we're talking.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Baby leg in his mouth.
Use your discernment, right?
I knew the Holy Spirit was telling me. But then he was like, look at the biblical stories. Look at Samson, the strongest man who ever lived. He goes, who else was the strongest man who ever lived? And I was like, Hercules. And he's like, yeah, exactly. Hercules, completely mythical figure, yet he's the Greek version of Samson. And he started to show kind of just very broad stroke, kind of how people wrote about these stories, and they look very similar. Origin mythologies like the Mesopotamian mythology that we find in Babylonian, Enuma Elish, Epic of Gilgamesh, the whole nine, right? And I went, oh my gosh, like God is bigger than just the Bible, right? Because this is where I was at.
Right.
God's bigger. So God is bigger than just Jesus. Jesus was just for the Jews and like the Gentiles right there at that time, like almost like Baha'i, where they think like God is talking through each culture and different prophets and religions. And I was like, man, maybe pantheism's true. Maybe like it popped this fundamentalist bubble of mine.
That's a great way to go, though.
Oh, it did. It was like I was 35,000 feet in an airplane.
Yeah.
And he was like, look, can I help you land the plane comfortably? And I did. I was like, God's still good. In fact, God is everywhere in everything. Right? Because I had this, like, it really was a freedom I needed from where I was. So I ended up believing that God is bigger than the Bible and is expressing itself. I didn't use a pronoun anymore. It was like it loves everyone and it is the best thing, all this stuff. And then eventually I ventured into just learning a little bit of science. And that's when it went, hold on, like what am I talking about? And then it became like, am I talking about naturalism? Or am I talking about nature itself is God? Like that's when I started going, what the heck is going on? And then I said, why? I'm just skipping ahead here. Like, why do I need the God idea? And where does that God idea come from? The name of the show, right? Origins of God. Like, where's this all come from?
Right. So, where does it come from?
You'd answer
Canaanite
questions,
right? Canaanite myths. Is that where we're heading there? Anyways, the Canaanite myths. So, a lot of these myths are very similar to the biblical myths, and that's where they came from. So, how'd that happen? How'd that work?
Oh, goodness. Well, how? That's I'm no expert, so I wouldn't be able to give you the specificity or whatever, like give you all the details of what actually happened. But I would say the Baal cycle goes way, way back. And El is the name of the father. He's the father god of Baal. And there are various Baal cycles. There's different versions of this mythology that stayed alive through the centuries, just like the version of Israel's God stayed alive.
Other god, for sure. Yeah.
In fact, Baal and Baal, however you want to pronounce it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Baal.
Yeah. you
Baal,
gotta get
I
that
know.
straight.
Yeah. Like you're skipping. Yeah.
Good
Like we're all
point.
glitching.
Yeah.
I think everybody gets what,
Yes.
hopefully. They compete, right? So the Bible has the God of the Bible compete with Baal.
Yep.
Right.
All. And El is the father of both of them. Eventually, El merges into Yahweh. So Yahweh or Yah, however you want to pronounce, ends up becoming El. But a lot of the scholars I talk to go, this stuff goes way, way back there into the Canaanite cycle. The Canaanite religion in the region where we would call Western Asia or the Middle East. And in this region, it's not like it was just its own thing. They were dominated by Egypt. So you're going to get influence from Egyptian mythology and lore. They conquered for a millennia. They owned this land and had these people working under them, which might make sense why we have kind of an Exodus mythology.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's such importance put on that Exodus mythology too.
Yeah.
Such
It's,
importance.
there's so much. Today I did an episode with Dennis McDonald that really shocked me. And I'm like, I've heard this before, but you did a really good job. He talked about how when Moses went on the mountain and the children of Israel made the golden calf.
Oh,
and
I love the
they-
punishment for that story.
Oh, it's
Such a fun-
horrible. Yeah.
Oh, so intriguing. It's like, why? Go ahead, sorry.
Absolutely. No, you're good. And he pointed out, like I said, because he's all about the Greek stuff. And Dennis is aware of what the Homeric epics, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the
nice.
Greek gods. And he said a lot of classicists and scholars have noticed that when Odysseus and the men were on their way to Troy for battle, Odysseus went off to pray on a mountain, by the way. And his men killed one of the calves of the golden sun, or one of the gods' calves. You're not supposed to touch the cattle. So they killed this cattle, and the god is not okay. Kills every one of them.
Oh my God.
Every one of them that participated in the killing of the calf to eat because they were starving to death.
Wow.
So Odysseus comes back. He's the only one who makes it all the way back home, by the way. But in the narrative of
You ruined it. I haven't finished that story. Damn it, Derek.
Oh, spoiler alert.
Well, yeah, we should have put a spoiler on that one.
Yeah.
we should.
Damn it.
Yeah. Well, they all die, and there's the spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But in the Bible story, it's everyone who sacrificed. The funny thing is, Aaron gets to live at least, it
Right.
seems. But
Wasn't it his idea?
It seemed like they were. He claims
That's
and blames them that he was pressured into it, but yet, come on, bro.
Yeah. Shit
but
goes uphill.
It always, yeah. But Moses ain't having it, right? So you know how the death happens and the earth swallows them up and all of that. But it's for also a golden calf or a calf, right? So one is a bull being sacrificed to eat. The other one is a golden calf. And because of that, they're killed in this wilderness state where they don't get to enter the promised land or go home. Whereas in the Odysseus story or the Odyssey, they don't get to go home. Odysseus does. And of course, his great epic. If you haven't read the myth of Odysseus, it's really crazy, hardcore. It's fun.
The middle and the beginning are great. Just now we know the end.
Right.
Skip that part from now.
This is like, if I could take a sliver of something and just put it on top and say, what I just said is like a just a blink of an eye of all the material that we could get into about mythology,
So much.
on where these narratives come from and why we should see them as literature, not really buy into the historical, not saying there may not be kernels of history here.
Right.
Yeah.
There may be memories and stuff. And that's the fun part because we like to tell a story.
Yeah.
Back when I used to drink, I would talk about a fight I got into and you would have thought, okay, Hercules. But in fact, it wasn't quite like that. I walked away limping. Okay. Like it wasn't as easy as I made it out to seem. Well, we do that. Humans do it. It's human nature.
Yeah.
And I think that the origins of God are also human nature. When we start getting into why do we even concoct the idea of God? The evolution of God, sure, we can go back to Canaan, but God's existed well before we can even document El and Yahweh and Baal. There were gods way before this.
Yeah.
Right. Fraser. Have you read any Fraser? What's his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Old Testament parallels, all that fun stuff of the Golden Bough. That's what the one is.
Yep.
So much information.
Golden bow, however you want to pronounce it, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it's the bough of the tree, so I just go bough. But
Yeah.
so much information in there. I highlight. I think I've read it twice at this point. It's just like it's basically naturistic. You know, we've all come. We animize nature and then anthropomorphize. That's the word. And then it just grew from there, and it just keeps changing and evolving. And it's very interesting. 100%. Like the Canaanite thing, like that was their home originally because they were Canaanites. They were probably brought out through Egypt or somebody, dispersing them and whatnot. And they wanted to get back to the homeland, and that's where the whole idea came from. And it's just crazy how they just add the magic stuff to it. Oh, God, Yahweh let us out. Yeah. He saved us from the Egyptians and blah, 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 blah. No history for that. Just claims.
Yeah.
It's really complicated too. I wouldn't know if it's 100% only Canaanites that make up the concoction of Israel.
True.
Its origins, I've interviewed Lester Graby, and the list goes on with academics when we talk about this, but they don't know if it was purely Canaanites only. It's like what happened with America. They always like to use this analogy, all of them, and they say Britons who are escaping the tyrannical king over there in Britain wanted religious freedom and came here to the United States.
Wow.
While they were here, of course, Britain comes and tries to bring taxes and with the king's stamp. The Americans, who are really Britons, aren't having that.
Essentially. Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah. And now, of course, there's French that come over and help too. We get and even in some cases, you had Native Americans participate. In certain situations, right? Or African Americans that have joined in on this. My point is they identified as something else by that point. They were calling themselves Americans.
Right.
So Israel, as we know it, may be a concoction, an amalgamation of various nations who formed in the mountain regions over here where we call Israel or Jerusalem and such. So it's
a melting pot.
Interesting. Melting pot. Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. A great way to think about it. For sure.
Yeah.
All those ideas accumulating and whatnot.
Yeah. So I think, like for me, once I started looking into mythology more, like for you, did the Bible become even more interesting looking into it through this lens? Was it like way more alive? Did it come to life for you?
I love the Bible now.
Yeah.
And I love calling it out. I love to call it out and say what it is. It's a human document. Yeah. It's a timestamp of a time in which our ethics or their ethics are nothing like ours.
Yeah.
And so I love the Bible, just like I love Game of Thrones. I see some crappy stuff happen in there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we shouldn't do that, buddy. But there are certain things that is like, wow, now that I look at it from a humanist perspective.
And you don't have to dedicate your life to following it.
Right.
You can see it in that way and appreciate it for
step outside that bubble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm glitching.
No, that's okay.
Well, you look really good in slow-mo, so it doesn't matter. You're good.
It didn't freeze on a weird
Okay. Just checking.
That was much better.
Yeah. Well, at least it doesn't glitch on a weird face or anything.
We got a question from the group here.
Yeah.
Is the consensus among scholarly peoples accepted there was no Moses?
Ooh, what does it mean by scholarly people? Because you can get a PhD. Well, yeah, most likely he didn't exist.
There it is. There it is.
But if you ask a scholar who's an apologist, or if you ask a rabbi who has a PhD or something, it depends. But most likely the people who are very religious that are more conservative are going to say, of course he existed. My narrative doesn't fall apart, That's not to say he didn't, or that he did exist or didn't exist. We aren't sure. We're really not positive about this. But most of the scholars, I think, is like, he's just too early. And if he did exist, we've lost him to like any verification in history. So.
And don't we have other comparative stories that are similar that came before that? the basket
Yeah.
story being caught up and all that. Yeah.
Sargon.
So I mean, yeah. Tell us about that. Yeah.
So yeah, Sargon gets in a basket and they let him down into a basket in the river. Of course, before he's let in this basket, there are signs, portents, predictions that a king is going to come, a leader of the people. And of course, no matter what, harm's way won't happen. He survives being in a basket, being put in the river, just like Moses is in the Nile. And many academics are, and there's debates. You know, I always like to mention there's debates, but many academics will go and say, looks a little bit like it's walking like a duck, talking like a duck, quacking like a duck, smells like a duck. It's probably a duck. Like there seems to be some overlap. And of course, Assyria, like which direction did the flowing happen? Because people will go, oh, they copied the Bible, right? Apologists. Usually when you're conquered and you're a little people compared to the empire that took you up and swallowed you in, usually the influence is the big empire changes your mind instead of vice versa. That doesn't mean there isn't both ways influence. Typically, though, this happened in Assyria, this happened in Babylon. The Persians, of course, influenced Judaism, and that's where we get heaven and hell from. Right. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that took place. And the Greeks, of course, with Hellenism. So, like, you could see, like, this overwhelming, most likely Sargon's narrative started first. And in some way, the impact on the Bible happened.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you said you were a literalist, or were you a literalist, or you said you were an inerrant? You believe the Bible was inerrant and everything. So did you believe all the stories in the Old Testament were true at one point? Because that's how I grew up believing. I believed they were all true. I believed in Noah's Ark, that it was an actual historical event. I even watched Answers in Genesis put out that Genesis is history documentary, and I was like, oh my gosh, the Grand Canyon was definitely formed from the flood. And I was like, it was confirming my bias. And I just, okay, perfect, that's just one check for the Bible. And it was actually the story of Noah's Ark that when I heard it was in other mythologies, that's when all the cards just came down for me. And I was like, okay, what? So was there any particular, and that's when I was like, as soon as I learned that, it was my entire, because I was a Christian like you my entire life. I believed it word for word, literal. Was there anything like that for you, like a story that you came across and then you found out for it to not be true and it all fell apart? Or was it mostly talking to that atheist on the phone? Or was there a moment that kind of where it all just came crashing down?
You know, I can't remember an aha moment because I landed the plane. What I did, as I said in the intros, I thought everything was literal like you. I thought the earth was 7,000 years old. Yeah. I watched Kent Hovind. Yes, I said the cuss word. Okay. He was like one of my favorite young earth creationist teachers who like convinced me that it was true about 12 to 14 years ago. Wow. And I was a Calvinist, inerrant. The Bible was true. If you found a contradiction, it's just you didn't understand that it wasn't a contradiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there was a way to work around it.
Context. It's all context.
Right. And you don't have spiritual eyes, so you're obviously not going to see like what we see.
Yes.
I think what happened is when he gave me comparative mythology and started going, why would we discredit Hercules? And, you know, looking at the other deities that he would compare to, or even going into Hinduism and showing me interesting things, or older Osiris and Isis, and like, just why not them? He kind of edged, like he made me really comfortable. And this is what I appreciated about him. He wasn't fighting me. He let me kind of process it. And he was a friend the whole time. And I can't name him because he does it. Maybe when he decides that I can, I'll start mentioning his name because he's a great guy. Awesome. His mom's still alive. Yeah. And he's just like, look, once you see them, like, don't you think it's a bit rude and disrespectful that people really believed Osiris and Isis? Like people really believed in Hercules. Like like, they're just like us. They're humans. Like, why are they wrong and you're right? And he kind of made my guard came down.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, hold on. And when I saw the comparison, it made me go, okay, the Bible's true. I still thought it was true, right? Didn't really address the inerrancy thing. Didn't need to. Because then I went, maybe it's talking about astrology. Maybe it's talking about figurative allegories about the heavens and the sun and the moon and the stars.
Right.
So it was true, but it wasn't literal. And that was the path I started going down. I started listening to people that would be considered fringe in the scholarly world, like Acharya S. They called her D.M. Murdoch. She was a really big impact on me, thinking, look at the mythology. Did Jesus even exist, right? She was a hardcore mythicist and stuff. And you might have.
Is she blonde?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So I started listening to her, and then I also was listening to Freemason, famous esotericist from the 1930s. Why can't I remember his name? He started looking at patterns that you kind of find overlap in other worldviews and other religions. Someone, okay, I'm just reading here. Sorry.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that. We'll get that later.
Oh, okay. I know StreamYard, so I'm like, is he trying to communicate with me? Okay. So just making sure. But yeah, I started to look at it and go, man, she's a bright woman. And I was investigating this, and she made me start thinking of patterns. And so did the Freemason. I can't remember his name, but he started looking at patterns. Like, I know that they had 5 celestial bodies and 2 luminaries. The sun and the moon are the luminaries, and there's 5 planets that were gods.
Right.
And you take 5 plus 2, you get 7, this sacred number that you find well before the Bible. Inanna cried out to her father. What was the name of God? It's in this book. I recommend everybody get.
Oh, God,
if you haven't read this, I swear on it. It's my new Bible. Like,
really?
Oh, I'm not kidding. Francesca Stavrakopoulou, she's a professor who's taught on this. The goddess Inanna traveled from her temple to Uruk to Nippur in the hope of arousing Enlil. That's right. Her father god was Enlil. And anyway, it goes on to explain that, like, on the 7th day, there's a lot of sevens that take place. Like, you kind of get a picture of the origins of the Sabbath in Mesopotamia. And I started going like, hold on, this is like celestial. Their calendars, their holy days are falling on special days that are dealing with the heavens and patterns that they're seeing and observing through the seasons and the years. And I thought, maybe some of these stories aren't literally true. And so I heard this Freemason. I can't believe I can't remember his name, because I'd love to give it to you. It's not Crowley. See, I'm looking in the chat. If DM Murdoch was still alive, I'd interview her, and I would have already. She'd have been one of my go-tos initially when I started MythVision. I'm not so sure she would want to still participate at this point. Maybe not. I don't know. Because I'm specifically dealing with like a lot of scholars that are inside of the mainstream bubble. But either way, I can't believe I can't remember his name. But the point is he was explaining the Samson story. We talked about Samson being the strongest man, but this kind of blew my mind a little. And here's Samson. His name, Samson, means little son. Okay. You know, like the little son or sun. It's an image of the sun. His name is literally of the sun that's in the sky, right? And he's strong, and his strength is in his hair. And if you cut his hair, he loses his strength. Now you get all this filler in the narratives, and you're like, okay, cool. There's fun stuff. He obviously is attracted to Philistine women. And I'm like, okay, I can relate to this guy. You know, like this is a cool story. So Samson ends up falling in love with a woman who's not in love with him, but she pretends to be in love with him. And she's Delilah. But Delilah has this little scheme with the people who want to take Samson down, because he's already kicked the Philistines' butts over and over. They can't stop the guy.
The jawbone. That was a great story.
Jawbone of an ass, 1,000 men. Yeah. So I even started going, is that true? Did that literally happen? So the strength of Samson is a big issue they're trying to take out, and they get the girl who Samson's falling in love with to try and go and infiltrate. And she's offered a lot of silver. Now, the way that he was portraying this is that silver is oftentimes kind of a symbol for the moon. And here you have the moon and the sun. The sun is in love with the moon, but it betrays the sun. Okay. And so what ends up happening is she finally on the third try, you constantly get this 3 days, 3 days he'll resurrect, 3 days Jonah, the whole 9.
Yep.
The third try. And she finally cuts his hair. And when he does, he loses his strength. And what do? They gouge out his eyes. They take hot, what do you call those, rods, and they burn out his sockets so he can't see. And he said that this was symbolizing the sun going into the winter solstice. The sun, the days are getting shorter the closer we get to the winter. And when it finally gets toward the winter solstice, the sun gives up its light. It loses its strength, and the moon gains its strength. But that's why he's like grinding mill in the dungeon somewhere under the Dagon temple. And it's almost like, here's our food during winter, kind of that idea. And I'm thinking, whoa, hold on. So here we have the sun and the moon, and it's a symbol of astrology written in a format that's like a story of a real people, anthropomorphized story of the sun and the moon.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, is this literally true? It sounds like it's trying to tell us a story, a lesson, using their perception of heaven on earth. And you see this ancient moniker that would be like, on earth as it is in heaven, or as above, so below.
Right.
So here you have the moon and the sun fighting. And of course, in the end, the sun gets its strength back and destroys the Dagon temple. He pushes the pillars, the whole 9. So I thought, wow, I could read this literally, or I could read it and maybe see it the way people were really perceiving it, maybe. And that's when I started going, wow, interpretation. Like,
context. You're taking it out of context, Derek.
Yeah.
You're just taking it out of context. You don't understand. It's all about Jesus. Clearly.
Of course.
Well,
I apologize.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, remember the riddles when Samson ends up telling a riddle at his, like he says, any man who figures this out, I'll give him, I can't remember what it was, all the clothes I think he took from all these people or whatever. And then some guy ends up finding out the riddle from his wife. He gets pissed and kills 30 more men or something. The number 30 shows up, which is a cycle of a month.
Hit the like button, or Derek will tear down your temple of Dagon.
That's true.
Dagon.
Listen, Dragons in Genesis is literally, he's not a liar. I'll tell you that.
No,
much.
he's great. That guy's great.
This is
Jason,
true.
check out his show for sure.
Absolutely.
After you check out Derek's.
No, check both. Honestly, I encourage everybody to let's create a community, right?
Hey, there's an idea.
Subscribe to this channel. If you're from MythVision right now, subscribe to this channel. Please show love. Trust me, when you're bored and you need someone to support, I promise you're going to find something fun and interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that blew my lid. So then I said, where does this end? And I was reading Jonah and the big well. And I thought, damn, I thought I've heard of this. Jason and the Argonauts in the ancient mythology. Right? With the ark, they're on this giant ship. They're on the ocean water, and there's a sea beast, a creature. And I'm thinking, okay, hold up. Jonah goes to run. He jumps in the water. This giant fish or whale swallows him. And I remember, this is the funny little caveat. I remember as a fundamentalist recording myself with my phone, and I was like in the car driving. I said, if the Bible said that Jonah swallowed a whale, I would believe it.
Yeah.
I swear. I'm not making this up. I wish I had the recording to show you how ridiculous my fundamentalism was.
Yeah.
But if Jonah, a man, swallowed this whale, I would have believed it because the Bible says it.
Totally.
Anyway, I started going, is this true?
Yeah.
Anyway, Apostacie, please.
No, it's okay. I was going to say, because a lot of from my last couple of years in the church and really learning hermeneutics and all the way to interpret scripture and stuff, they would say how if you want to interpret the Old Testament, you have to look at the New Testament, and you'll find all the stories of Jesus in the Old Testament, and every story in the Old Testament will point to Jesus. So Like Jonah and the whale, it's 3 days that he was in the whale. That represents Jesus being in the tomb for 3 days and everything. So like that just continues. Do you find like that just continues a narrative of like this whole myth of like hearing into Jesus, or is like, how do you see that?
It's extremely complicated, and when you start diving into it, and the reason why is like when I was not into the scholarship, it was like yes,
exactly.
Yes.
Everything was just
everything was just like it connects,
and they know better.
But when you start looking at the context of Second Temple Judaism and how Jews interpreted and were using the scriptures and we're finding secret codes and messages in the scriptures, you start to like realize, hold up, it's not one thing. For example, the New Testament talks about the Son of Man. And when you read Daniel, it talks about one like the Son of Man, which means like a human. But he's not a human, according to John J. Collins. He's like a human. And then you read First Enoch, it's a heavenly Son of Man, like a celestial figure. But then when you read other Second Temple Judaism, it's a man on earth. It's a human. And like you get lost in realizing like, what the heck? Like, what is it and how do we know? And that's why I go to the scholars to try and like piece together whose case they're making and why they think this. And John J. Collins, I'm interviewing him tomorrow. So that's why I mentioned his name. He's a great guy. Your point's well taken, though, because when I was a Christian, I saw Jesus from Genesis all the way.
Right? Because that's how you're kind of trained to see it.
Right. And I wonder if there is some sense in which the reason it's easy for Christians to see that is not only that they were reading the Bible, and I'll say the Old Testament is their Bible, and they were just finding ways to connect those dots, which is easy to do after the fact.
Yeah.
You know, oh, hold on, that's talking about Jesus. We escaped to Egypt. You know, like, and this is the most common sense. Anyone would do this with any other literature. But you get to the Bible and their method changes. It's like, no, this is real prophecy. It's like, bro, would you do that if I found this in, you know, any type of Roman emperors that have portents? You wouldn't do that with them, would you? All you got to do is read Lives of the Caesars, go to the section on Augustus, look at the portents that it talks about before he's born. You would say, that's after he was born. I know. Me too. I think so too. But when we get to the Bible, you want to change the game because you have a belief you want to protect.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, it fits in.
Do you think that's why this has continued on the way for so many years? Like, is that why Christianity has lasted? Like, because they have a belief they want to protect?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the Millerites, right? They predicted the end of the world in 1840 something. Well, the main guy that started the movement. This is all coming out of New York. They had a burned over district, a lot of radical, like, we're going to reform and get back to original Christianity. And the guy was like, in 1844, I think it was, my dates might be off here, but Jesus is coming back on this day. Everyone goes out in the field, waits all day long. Nothing happens. After that, there was a split in the group. That like day caused a split. Some people said he did come down, but right behind the clouds, which is unfalsifiable. It's like
1844.
But then it was right.
1844. Great disappointment.
Okay, so I was right about the date. And the other side was like, look, we just got the date wrong.
Right.
Do you notice a problem between the two? There's two choices that typically happen. And I don't know of anyone who actually left the cult. So we got two choices. Either Jesus did come, but he was like behind the clouds. So it's like an intermediate coming. So they have some cognitive dissonance. The other side was like, well, we just got it wrong. So like, obviously we just got to wait a little longer and he's coming back. None of them went, guys, it's not true. Like none of this is true that we believe in. And it's clear because none of our guys can figure it out or whatnot. No, it's called cognitive dissonance. And when you have a belief and you're protecting it, there's a book I recommend.
Is it cultish?
Yeah. But I mean, it's human nature.
Right.
Like if you like, you love
no, but I mean, the book is the book you were going to recommend cultish? Because No. Oh, okay.
Well, I was just going to say, like, you love your mom and dad, to give you an analogy, right? Like, typically, if you're rational, you'll probably try to be as honest about it. But if you, like, protect your mom or your dad, let's use your dad, for example, because we can pick on guys better. It's two guys and one girl here. That's not fair. So we got to pick on men. So we're picking on your dad here for a second. And, like,
easy target.
Someone comes and, and someone says your dad was a bully. growing up. Like your dad was this bully in high school. He was a horrible person. And you're like, my dad is not a bully. Like, cut the crap. And they're like, no, like I can like show you, like I can have you meet 3 people who've been tortured or whatever. And you're like, that is not possible. I know my dad. I've believed in my dad this whole life. He's done good. He's always been nice to me. He's my dad. You're going to defend it. You believe in your dad, even if the facts, let's say, were against it. I'm using that as a hypothetical because it's personal, and that's what these beliefs are. Right. So I'm going to protect my brother. Like if I go out somewhere and my brother starts something, I know this sucks. I'll do my damnedest to try and like not have something happen. But if someone starts swinging on him, I'm probably automatically going to jump in that fight. And I'm trying to give like real life, actual practical applications for what is going on with cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
It's tough to break through. I call it the Jesus wall. It's really hard to break through that Jesus wall. It's just like no matter how many facts you throw at them, it just smacks against that Jesus wall. And it doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah.
Melody Joy says, after I started to question MythVision and Tovia Singer helped me let go of Jesus. So that's always good job, man. Good job. Thanks for helping out.
Melody's I love Melody. She is a one. I always told her she's like the cheerleader in the chat. Aww. And she's always there, like really always there, root me on. And when I'm having like a tough day, a lot of people who watch MythVision won't know it. I just go and I want to educate and help people. That's what I always do. And I'll pay attention to the chat and like, it'll make my day that much better when I see people like that down there. So Melody, we love you. Thank you for the compliments.
That's nice.
Keep it up, Melody. Great job. Skeptic Haven's question here. How does Derek look at the developing domestic and or common religious practices in ancient Israel that occurred very often outside the temple cult of elites?
How does Derek look at the developing domestic and or common religious practices? And that's a tough one. I mean, Pat knows a lot more about this than I do as someone who is excavating these sites typically. I know he usually is doing like AD, post 70 sites, but I'm sure he would know more about this than I do. He's in academia. But obviously it was a completely different religious system than the elites. The elites had a particular elitist program by which they ran, and we're not even sure that they were implementing this on the common people. This may have just been the boys' club. It's like, look at the Freemasons. How many people are part of the Freemasons? It's a boys' club, and we have all the secrets. We have all the elite knowledge. I think later on, the biblical literature that is written by priests and whatnot start to become more common, but polytheism and various gods for millennia were the common thing in the Bible. In fact, every prophet's pissed off because they're all doing it. I don't know. Maybe someone was shouting from the corners every once in a while, these elites saying, guys, stop with all those gods. But like they couldn't make them stop. I don't know. It's hard for me to say, but I don't know much more about what Pat's trying to get at here. If we could get specific, if we can get into more
Derek
of a specific...
is being humble. He's talked about or talked to the leading scholars on this field. I'm not that guy. He's not that guy.
Well, Pat does know about this stuff, just like I know. So he's being humble too. So are we trying to out humble ourselves here?
Right.
Because Moses wrote he was the most humble guy ever.
Right.
And like
even Dragons in Genesis is telling us to sub to Pat Lowinger now. He's got great info. So
he sent me a bunch of coins.
I wrote that down.
I've got medieval coins over here that he sent me, 4th to 6th century Roman coins he sent me. I've got to work on them with my family. We're gonna clean them off, and I got to find out where they're from. Cool. And Pat's awesome.
Oh man, really nice job, cool. Pat. 2 thumbs up right there, buddy. Nice.
Absolutely.
That's so cool.
But if I might mention what I think, like as the title, the origin of God, right? Or the origin of gods. Like we talked about nature. You mentioned this earlier, like nature worship and naturalism really explains why there's all these different powers.
Yeah.
Apostasy might see lightning where she lives and be like, whoa.
I see a lot of it.
Zeus, you better chill, calm down, Zeus. And then someone's out on the ocean and the waves are intense and they're like, chill out, Poseidon. Like, what's going on, man? Calm down. 2 powers. And it makes sense to like break the world up into various components like that with multiple powers. And natural phenomena get anthropomorphized and they become, they get characteristics. In fact, I can't remember the name of the book. Recently, I had a scholar named John Wathy on who was talking about the illusion of God's presence, how we think there's something there that isn't there, and why, using natural cognitive examples, and why, to put it simply, and I'm rabbit trailing bad here in this explanation,
but
you're okay.
Like
it's
when
totally
you're born, you're taken care of by a mother. Like you will not exist if she doesn't take care of you. You cry, she gives you attention, she feeds you, she nourishes you. Without that presence there that you assume is there as an infant, you won't survive. You have to. It's built into your mechanisms, genetically speaking, environmentally, like just from your own subjective experience as a human so far. And your mother's there. So now you get older and you don't need mom to put a spoon in your mouth, but that mechanism, that thing in which you automatically assumed agency was there, doesn't go away. So assuming there's something there looking out for you, because, wow, how did I get there on time? Oh, that coincidence. Like you start assuming something is involved like that mother figure. And this is what his point was.
Coupled with the fact that we love stories. Like, that's our shit. We tell stories about everything. Fishing, even fishing will tell stories about it. I mean, shit. I mean, that's where we
100%. John Wathy, that's what I was going to say. And I rabbit trailed like an idiot off into La La Land. He said that they wrote about chimpanzees in Africa when a thunderclap, I mean, hard thunderclap hit. The chimpanzee went up in the trees. Multiple chimpanzees went up. And they shook their fist at the lightning, like, why are you out to get us? Like they have thought that the lightning's trying to attack them. So they assume there's agency where there is no agency. And that's natural. So if chimps are doing this and we humans have just larger brains, we've evolved to have larger brains, we are just assuming agency. And so now, as a recent book, Yahweh's Divine Images by Dan Mcclellan, if you have not interviewed him, get Dan Mcclellan. Dan Mcclellan, I'll send you the link if you want to check it out. His book is free on PDF. If you want to get the printed copy, it costs. He gives an example in the book, and I've already heard this before, but it was a good one. If you and me in the ancient world are like hunter-gatherers, Mike, and Apostacy's back at the campfire,
the ranch. No.
Or let's be equal here. Let's be equal. Apostacy's with us out here hunting. She's a badass.
Okay, fine.
Okay. She's a badass, and she's got the spear. We're standing back. But we're walking on the trail, and we hear a rock
most likely,
down the side. This is probably how things would go. So the rock tumbles down, and we look up, and we see a deer. We're kind of computers, right? Memory. Our memory is faulty, but nonetheless, it's there. It helps us survive and such. We then would compute in our minds that when something's falling down, or the bush is moving, or rocks tumbling down the hill, there's some agent, a deer, an animal, and usually probably out to get us. So we have to be on our defense. But we would assume when a rock tumbles down the hill, there's something there. Now, if you saw a massive rock tumble or a mountain falling or collapsing, and we were seeing the snow, right? And avalanche or volcano erupt, we take the little computing that we do on a small level with animals and say something way bigger, way more powerful did that. This is the origin of gods. You look at a volcano, I don't care if you're the most naturalist, atheist, skeptic in the world, stand outside and let the hardest thunderclap happen while you're out there. You will inside innately go, holy shit, something intense beyond my power just did that. And you would be able to rationalize it after the fact and go, well, yeah, of course, that was lightning. And that was, well, we have the core of the earth and magnetic the sphere. And you would want to explain how this may have occurred. But like, you would still be shocked to your core. And I think this is where some of this plays into a role. There's more. When your loved ones die, our brains don't just turn off, that they're gone. So there's this mechanism that we have when a loved one's gone, we still experience them or feel they're still with us. And a lot of times psychologists that interview people who are traumatized from the loved one's death, they come in and they say, I heard them or I saw them. And oftentimes it might be in a dream, but they couldn't perceive whether they were in a dream or awake because they're in a traumatic, like they're going through some serious stuff. Stress. But they think they're alive.
Yeah.
And when the loved ones in the ancient world died, they were immortalized and sometimes worshipped.
Yeah.
So this might, and I threw this out at Daniel Mcclellan. I said, dude, do you think it's possible that Yahweh, the God of Israel, which we aren't certain where this God comes from, but we think it comes from the south of Canaan, the southern regions. Do you think this God was a man who may have led a tribe or was some military leader in a group? And he died and became divinized into a storm deity like Baal. Yeah, deified. And he goes, Derek, in my dissertation, that's exactly what I tried to posit. And I said, whoa!
Wow.
It blew my mind. I don't know if this is true. He doesn't know if it's true. But if God was really a
what
man
an idea,
at one
though.
point,
then
the Mormons are closer to the truth.
No kidding.
Yes.
Don't tell them. Don't tell them.
Oh my
God.
gosh.
Holy cow. Yeah, what a concept, though. Man,
it is
an idea. I mean, Jesus, obviously, you know. Just, Skeptic Haven question here. Derek is 100% correct. The origin of religion is that's the word. Connected to our species. Need to relate causation with explanation. Yeah, 100%. I mean, that whole would you say the agency that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. How does Derek look at the developing domestic? Sorry, go ahead.
No, we already covered that question.
Yeah, we did that one. Practices in nature. Yeah, we did that one. Yeah.
Give us your questions, fam.
Right, come on, fans.
And by the way, do you have more than 1,000 subs yet?
Yes, we do.
Are you monetized?
I don't know.
Should be.
They should be able to super chat you.
Oh, yeah, super chat us.
What's a super chat?
Oh, you don't have it. It's not showing up.
Oh, you don't super chatting.
We got to get you monetized here. There's no reason you're not monetized. Well, super chats pop up where people can help donate to the channel. It helps the channel grow, and their question comes up in color and everything, and it'll grow. You'll make money, you know, having your channel monetized. But it's a big way to help keep doing what you're doing. I mean, it never hurts to have a little funds because then you can invest. You can actually start investing in things you need, or you might need a guest that might cost to have them come on. I mean, sometimes they cost money to have a scholar join you, but yeah.
Right. Nice. Thank you for the tip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a question or a comment anyways. Dragons in Genesis says there's evidence the name of Yahweh was a war cry for South Semitic groups. He covered it in his last episode.
Interesting.
Awesome.
I got to check that out.
Yeah, seriously. Could you imagine? What a thing. Yeah, all these different gods and everything. They have amazing histories. Check them out, research them. Don't worship them, just research them.
I'm looking at Megan's question. This is a good question. What are your thoughts on non-overlapping magisteria? Stephen Jay Gould's idea that religion and science are essentially separate domains of knowledge. I'm an atheist, but find it interesting. I wouldn't completely separate them. This is yes, while we would say religious studies are, you know, a separate study than say scientific studies, but I would say that there's much more in common. In fact, that's what the book Yahweh's Divine Images goes into. And I think he even mentioned Stephen Jay Gould's idea. He uses all these natural phenomena to explain our perception, how we misperceive, all of this stuff before he even gets into Yahweh. So he's like, check it out. Before I get into these images and what we're looking at with standing stones for the gods and temples, he even explains that what are temples? Temples are like massive tombstones. And he said, if you look at a tombstone, you go and there's a tombstone of your loved one, and they're buried in a casket and whatnot. Temples are like that. They're shrines in which we put our loved ones in, and the gods are dwelling in. So while there may be some things that are unfalsifiable, religiously speaking, like we can't prove them, we can't test them, things like that, a lot of it, I think, is testable through psychology. We can at least our best heuristically. We can examine current and how people think today. We can try and take literature from the ancient world and try to piece together their thinking process. And then maybe we can better understand how they thought in the ancient world. But I would not say that they're completely separate domains, even though there might be some things that you can't use science to investigate with religion, my opinion. But
Michael Shermer's work references Gould a lot too.
I loved Michael Shermer's book, The Believing Brain. He shows that humans are actually more superstitious than animals. And when I say animals, we are an animal, but I'm using it for us humans to understand what I'm trying to say. Birds, other
cows,
like cows. They've done these experiments to show you we're pattern-seeking creatures, and because we have a bigger brain, we actually will create more patterns that aren't there than the animals that we aren't. So it blew my mind to read that book.
Wow.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Is there any evidence for historical David? That couples with another
King
question
David,
I have too.
Yeah.
Historical King David.
Scholars I talk to, they don't know if there's a historical David. Francesca Stavrakopoulos, she says, I don't think so. Even though there are writings about a house of David.
Yeah. Right.
So like it's hard. And then there's supposedly a pomegranate or something that got found that has, I think, House of David written on it. Archaeologically speaking, we're not sure.
Okay.
We're not sure.
Okay.
But it wouldn't blow my mind. And the reason why it wouldn't blow my mind, this is probably a horrible methodology on using what I would call an embarrassment. When they originally wrote this about David, it wasn't embarrassing, or they wouldn't have probably wrote it. It's just what they thought. Maybe they thought this wasn't bad. But if you read the earlier literature in the Bible using the scholarly approach, you've got like 1 Samuel and then you have 1 Kings. These are different books that write or rewrite the narratives of David. In the earlier literature, David is a murdering, like he's like sexually, off the charts and doing things that you would be like, oh, Game of Thrones. Like, I'm not kidding. They could make a real movie if we didn't have like Bible believing Christians trying to make religious movies because they suck most of the time.
Yeah.
If we had Hollywood grab King David and really just like skip the whitewashing of David that comes later in Chronicles and stuff like that, you would be like, this is a great movie. Like this is,
I'm sold already.
There's all sorts of stuff about David. And it makes me wonder, criteria, they call it the criteria of embarrassment. It's not the best methodology to use. So I could be completely wrong, but he looks bad enough that I would think maybe there was a guy. Maybe there was a guy who did this stuff. Maybe. It's a bad methodology because they could have written this as a fiction. They could have narrated David and said, here's this low guy who made all these mistakes, but he was still after God's heart and he's still a righteous man.
He's a man after God's own heart. Yeah. So that's an interesting thing to put in there.
David did cut off 4 skins and head off the head of a guy.
Yeah.
He's got some interesting stories. That's for sure. A lot of things in there. But that brings me to another question. Is we talked about Moses earlier. What other figure is Moses from, essentially?
What you mean, like
concept of Moses come from? Is there another comparison?
Well, Sargon is at least the birth narrative.
That one,
Sargon. We mentioned that. As far as like his life story, like I said with Odysseus, there's that myth where he goes on the mountain to pray and gets the tablets from God. So there seems to be some overlap there.
The whole sister thing. Is there anybody that kind of goes with that, where he brought his sister and then said it wasn't, or his wife and said it was his sister? And
that's not Moses.
That wasn't Moses?
So you're talking about Abraham.
Yeah.
I totally mixed him up there.
It's okay.
It was Abraham, and who else did it too? There was someone else that did it.
Isaac.
It wasn't Moses.
Oh no, Isaac, his son, did it.
I think there was Moses too. I feel like it was Moses who went to the Pharaoh and brought his sister, his wife, and said it was his sister. And
not the sexual part that you're trying to get at. I think you're trying to get at the part where Abraham brings his wife, calls her his sister, and he does it twice. Listen, and not with the same guy. So this is like, bro, this is the most funny thing I ever discovered when I started to like leave and read the Genesis account. Yeah. Abraham goes to Egypt. The Pharaoh sees his hot wife and he's like, whoa. And he would tell him that's his sister.
So they wouldn't.
So they wouldn't kill him. According to
yeah.
him, like, no, not Moses. Did I say Moses again?
You said Moses. That's okay. Abraham. We know what you're talking
about. It's okay. But Abraham does it, and then he's like, look, I did it. Once the Pharaoh realizes, because he has like either a disease or gets sick, something happens. Maybe he got syphilis. Who knows? I'm just kidding. But like, he's like, something's wrong. Why did you lie to me? And then he says, well, I thought you would all kill me. And really, the moral of the story, while we would look at this and see all the sex scene and all that, the moral of the story is Abraham didn't trust God. He didn't trust God, according to the story. So then it happens again, though, because Abraham goes to a whole nother city, and I can't remember the king's name.
Yeah.
He does it again. He lies and says it's his sister. The guy goes to sleep with her. And this is where the Bible's account gets really fishy. I interviewed a scholar. I can't pronounce his name. It's a Jewish name. He wrote a book. You can't miss this name. Why Abraham Murdered Isaac.
Oh, wow.
You remember the scene when Abraham goes to sacrifice Isaac?
Yeah.
And we all thought, he goes, and then the angel of the Lord goes, listen, God knows
there's a goat over there.
You trust God. That's why you were willing to do it. Notice the whole time he didn't trust God. Finally, at the end, he supposedly trusts God.
Right.
And he follows through. Like, he was really going to kill his only son, his firstborn, which really had Ishmael already. But the bondwoman and his son, he already like said, I'm not paying child support. Get out of here. So it's a horrible story about two people who get neglected because the one wife's, jealous, and she was the one pushing the slave to end up getting impregnated for him. Anywho, let's not get into the Jerry Springer antics here. It's a heavy story.
Yeah.
But in his book, he said that Abraham actually murdered Isaac.
Wow.
The story goes after that narrative with Isaac, according to this scholar, you don't see Isaac mentioned in this narrative anymore. And he said, the reason is, and a lot of rabbis commented on this throughout the years, that he actually did kill him. And he set human sacrifice to the God of Israel. But they redacted it and corrected it. Once you get later on in Israel's history, they wanted to change that. And if you look at Isaac's story, guess who also takes his wife and says it's his sister?
Yeah.
His son.
Not Moses.
Abraham's son Isaac does exactly what his father did twice. So we have three accounts of the same story being told again in the Bible.
Oh my God.
I think this is the only place in the Bible where three, and I'm going to call it fictitious narratives.
It has to be.
But they seem to be from different traditions or something. So he thinks that they invented the Isaac narrative to fatten up and connect from Abraham to Jacob. Because according to him, the northern kingdom that existed in the 8th century that got conquered by the Assyrians, they had a completely different story, and their story connected to Jacob. And the Judahites later, once Assyria conquered and crushed Israel, and some of the northerners brought their stories to the south because they had to, the others were exiled and some remained in the land, which we later call Samaritans. The Judahites kind of formulated the story where they're the special son, Judah.
Of course.
And they create the narrative where Isaac gets invented just by padding out his story with everything Abraham did. And so it goes from Abraham to Jacob so we can explain the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's so fun to find this stuff out because it's so human.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. When you read the Bible from beginning to end, you can definitely see the humanity in it. 100%.
100%.
God loves the smell of barbecue. Of course we do. James Apperson says, can you summarize what you were trying to build with MythVision when you say we are building something? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm trying to build a strip club. Of course, James is a friend. I'm joking. What I'm trying to build is a safe place for anyone, whatever their ontology is. You can believe, you can say, Derek, I love what you said here. I disagree with what you said there. You cannot believe. You can be agnostic. You can be a theist. You can be an atheist. You can be whatever you are. Just defanging the crap me and Apostacie, and I suspect you, Michael, have been brought up with and have been harassed with, traumatized with, and all of that. Like, tone it down. I have friends who say, I like the story of a person who lays their life down for their friends.
Mhm.
If that's how they interpret it, and that's the way they walk away with it, whoop-de-doo. I'm not going to argue with it, right? But like, if you're over here enforcing your beliefs on other people, and you're trying to make me feel guilty about the mythology that you think is literally true.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm creating a place where there's freedom to come and talk about that and be happy to find out how human this is. And I want a community of people that are all over the place. I hope we don't all agree on everything.
Yeah.
But I want it to be a safe place too. I don't want bad ideas being pushed,
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Safe place.
Like
100%. We need that. We need more of that.
Absolutely.
More atheists in the group, the better. 100%.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, 100%. So,
but I'm saying you get my point. Like,
yeah, no, totally. Sure. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. We need more people building that safe space for us because it's a scary world out there for
that
sure.
Bridge from fundamentalism to atheism, I didn't get there overnight. It was not oh my God, this Christopher Hitchin video just slapped the theism out of me. Like, it didn't work that way, bro. I didn't like him. I didn't like him. I didn't like Dawkins. I didn't like any of these people. Sam Harris, even though he was a nice guy, I did not like Sam Harris. So it was that process I needed to realize interpretation isn't always literal. And then the cards, like, it's a house of cards.
It is. Yes.
He talks about that all the time.
That's exactly what it is. And then the one comes out and it just, and it's like, 100%. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But it's also, I found it exciting at the same time. I don't know about you, but
I did too. Yeah.
It's so exciting.
It's freedom.
Yes.
You really feel a freedom. Like, when people talk about being born again, it's like, bro,
that's
come be an atheist.
That's exactly what I said. I was like, I totally get this born again experience for the first time ever.
Yeah.
That's how it felt. I felt like I was actually waking up and seeing the world with fresh eyes. And I was excited about life because I wasn't living to die.
Right.
You know?
Wow. You put that so well.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
no. Yeah. It's definitely a freedom for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we've about wrapped up the time here. Derek, are there any closing comments you have for us today?
I mean,
where can we find your stuff, of course?
YouTube. Check me out on YouTube. That's really mainly like the main place. I have a Facebook page. I have Facebook groups. I'm on Twitter. I have a Discord that I'm never in, but I have a lot of people who do go in there, and like, I'm all over the place. I have a Patreon where I like that also helps fund what I do, but I have hundreds of videos that are not public that I work my what off to produce in high quality, and anyone who goes there, they can access all that stuff early. You can harass me with private messages, all that. But like, yeah, those are all my plugs. I didn't even mention to you that I also have another YouTube channel. It's to help drug addicts who struggle with addiction.
Wow.
Because 7 years ago, October the 25th of this coming month, I will have been off of heroin, mainlining heroin.
Wow.
And
good for you.
It's like, that also helped me in my deconversion process, but also with helping addicts who struggle with addiction. So there's just all sorts of things that are out there. If you go and you find me on Backpage or Only Page or whatever the place it's called, you got to pay top dollar to see that kind of stuff. I'm just no, like, seriously.
Video.
Yeah, right. At least $1 to see this, you know, like, right. But yeah.
No. Oh, thank you for that. Awesome. But the shirt, keep your shirt on for sure. I don't want to have to embarrass you or anything.
Yeah, no, the beard alone already makes me look. Yeah, you seen that one meme? They said they had a Muslim like imam saying stuff like, "Men without beards, they create temptation for us men," or some crap like that. Like, we're too feminine that they think. Oh yeah, it's a funny thing that I see.
I'm jealous of your hair on top. You can be jealous of this. It just doesn't stop.
I'm with
you. Thanks for coming on today. Thanks for joining us. Apostacie, where can we find your stuff?
Here on Wednesdays with you, and then I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Is your links in the description that I can actually go and join?
Mine?
Like, yeah.
I don't know if they're in the description, but if you just search
see your TikTok.
My name. Oh, you have. Okay.
Are you on YouTube?
I don't have a YouTube channel. No, okay. I'm here on not yet. I would like to. but I love doing this, and
Do it.
yeah, but I would like to. My mom keeps encouraging me to do one. I
Once
have
you start,
ideas.
you can't stop.
Yeah, I do have some ideas. So, yeah.
Well,
If you
we
do, I'll
encourage that.
subscribe.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, I would love to. If you ever
subscribe
do, I'd
to-
love to get
yeah.
your story and
Oh.
and hear about what happened, since you have a similar one to me. I like to interview
I-
ex-Christians, ex-Mormons, ex-Muslims, you name it. So
I've heard little bits of yours, and I think it is similar in some sense. So, yeah,
awesome.
that'd be great.
Great job. Great job.
Yeah.
I can be found at thebiblesayswhat.com.
Mhm.
Interview atheists or Christians every week. Not producers, the patrons of the show, Bassthrasher, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Bryce, Deborah Grace, Sunny Shell, Aaron Coalson, and Phil Calderone. Thank you guys for your support. We are here every week. We'll catch you next week. Don't forget to spay and neuter your pets. Thank you, everybody, for coming on. That's all the show there is for you today. See you next week.